Today we're making a World War I trench club from Battlefield 1. This will be one of the many weapons you can use in the game. Available October 21st, 2016. World War I was one of the most brutal conflicts in history, and the trench club was one of its most vicious weapons. With the introductions of machine guns and tanks, armies dug massive trenches to avoid getting shot. And when you jump down in an enemy's trench at night, you don't want to fire your weapon and wake the enemy platoon. But you can't swing your rifle because the trench is too narrow. So you grab your trench club and silently smash your enemy into submission. Brutal but effective. So now that you know why you need a trench club, let's make one.
These trench clubs were typically made out of found objects in the field, but since we're craftsmen, we're going to show you how we would make one. Along the way, we'll show you which found objects they most likely would have used to make their clubs. To get started, we have to choose our handle material. We had a really bad storm last month where we had a nice walnut tree fall, so we're going to use a piece of that. The core wood should be nice and hard, so Kerry will turn it down on the wood lathe, and then we're ready to go.
So Matt selected a piece of walnut for us. I'm going to start by debarking this, then I'm going to make this round. Then we're going to set up a bunch of calipers, and the calipers have the different sizes that we need. We'll go through and make all our cuts and make the thing beautiful.
So we're now gonna start making our coiled spring shaft on our trench club. They almost definitely didn't make their own springs. They would have used found springs. But if they did wanna make their own spring, this is how they probably go about doing it. We took a couple 2x4s and jury rigged up a nice little jig here. We're gonna stick our piece of material in this hole here, and then I'm gonna slowly wind as Ilya heats that material, and we're gonna coil it around our center rod. Got our spring completely coiled, warped up because of heat. We'll just use a wood hammer, get everything nice and true, heat treat the spring, temper the spring, and it'll be good to go.
So I've taken a clip right out of the game. This is the trench club. The head that's on here is a fairly symmetrical piece. We're going to turn one on the lathe. We're going to drill right down the center with a 5/8 drill. That's going to allow us to run a rod through the head and all the way down inside the coil to keep it stiff. I'll do the drilling first, and then I'll come out and do the outside curvature.
So we have the rough turned head from Kerry. He did this on the lathe. Typically he would go ahead and turn this down a little more, get it closer to the final shape, but I'm gonna go ahead and show you a different technique. We're gonna slide it on our shaft that's gonna go down our coil to make it more rigid, and I'm just gonna use it like this, use my thumb to slow it down a little bit. We want this to be a little more flat and this dome to go all the way to the center. All right, the next step is to make our Faro or end cap for the end of our handle, much like our crucible handle has here. It's the covering that protects the handle where the spring fits in. Most likely the way they would have done this is taking a large caliber shell, this is a 20mm shell, and just taking a slice out of it and use that. But we on Reforge like to complicate things, and you guys love to see some forging. So what I'm gonna do is take some smaller caliber shells, melt them down, pour them into an ingot, and then Kerry's gonna forge them out in the sheet and spin it to shape later on the lathe.
Before I stretch out the brass ingot into sheet, I have to anneal it first. I heat it up with a torch till it's slightly glowing, and then I just go into water. Now that the ingot is relatively soft, I'm going to use a relatively small hammer and start flattening it out cold on the anvil. I need a piece of sheet that's big enough to become the socket for the trench club.
With the ingot forged to shape, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to roll it through this rolling mill, progressively tightening the two rolls down, and that's going to create sheet for me. That sheet's what's going to be turned into the collar that holds the spring in place. Then we'll trim it once we reach the final thickness.
Picking up where Kerry left off, Ilya is now going to finish turning the handle. First he's going to wasp in the handle shape, then he's going to add textured grooves for better grip.
When the war started in 1914, it was the first major global conflict since Napoleon. And thanks to the Industrial Revolution, it was on a scale the world had never seen before. Soldiers were forced to improvise in the trenches, scrounging around for discarded pieces of wood to use as menacing clubs. They attached grenade casings, hammered in nails, and wrapped them in barbed wire to inflict maximum pain. These things were downright medieval.
All right, we got our handle now rough turned. Looks great. Put a hole in it so we can slip a lanyard in there. The lanyard just goes around your wrist when you're using it. Right now I'm just doing a little hand sanding. I don't want to get it too pretty. I want to keep it looking like it was made in the field. Then I'm going to use the torch and just make it look nice and aged.
Now it's time to heat treat the spring coil. I take my coil and take a random rod. I combine them, like so, to prevent the coil from uncoiling in the heat treat. I place the coil in the forge and heat it up evenly. After that, I go quickly into the oil to produce the hardness. I cannot overheat the coil, otherwise it will be brittle. And I definitely have to temper it so it will not break during use.
Didn't want to overburn it, just got a little color to it, antiqued it. Now the linseed oil will really make it stand out. It just brings out all those lowlights and highlights, makes it look like it's been used in a war. We're ready to go. Now that our spring is hardened, we have to temper it. We're going to place it in the kiln at 400 degrees and let it sit there for a couple hours.
So I want to show you where we are with some assembly. We've got the head turned, it's been polished off. This will be our center rod. It's going to go on here. We'll be bringing it up to about here, hot peening that surface in so it's a permanent piece. Down on this end, it'll be turned into a screw and go down into the wood handle. So it's going to sit inside of this coil. Going to make that coil solid, much more like it is in the game.
We're now ready to attach our striking head to our central rod. I'm going to hot peen this on just like you would a pommel to a sword. Now that I got my hot peen just about done, I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of the head heated up to get that nice dark color that we're looking for. You can see the color change from the heat right here. I'll just go ahead and hit a little bit more here so it's nice and fluid. All right, looks good to me. Give it a little hand scrub and we'll put the whole thing together.
Given the form of the spring, we'll be able to just screw this wood handle up tight and then the collar will hold it to form.
These trench clubs were usually made in either a factory or right on site. I think we came up with some really cool processes though to show you during this build, and I can't wait to see how it handles in the demo.
Until next time, stay sharp.
Thank you to DICE and EA for sponsoring this episode.